Hello, welcome to Cull the Weak. I'm Rob99.
I'm Shotgun.
Today we will be looking at an artifact called Trojan Sauropod. It is an uncommon. It has an amber pip. It is an item. It reads, Trojan Sauropod enters play under your opponent's control. Omni, gain 3. Your opponent reveals their hand and puts each creature from it into play, ready. Then refills their hand as if it were their draw card step. Destroy Trojan Sauropod. Okay, this is different, to be sure. I don't think we've seen an artifact that enters play under your opponent's control. The Caper from AOA, and which is back in this set, is a creature that enters play under your opponent's control and destroys its neighbors. But I think for an artifact, this is a first. Giving your opponent the ability to gain 3 when they feel like it, it seems really strong. And you are giving them the option of when they want to trigger this. So, that could be really powerful. What if you just happen to not have very many creatures in your hand, or you have some really great play effect creatures in your hand when they decide to trigger this? You're not doing yourself a ton of favors. I mean, they come in ready and then you get to refill your hand, but I don't know. That seems like a pretty big gamble. What do you think of Trojan Sauropod here?
You really have to read the situation.
Yeah.
Because if someone plays this card on me, I'm just letting it sit there until I use it to threaten the third key and severely hamstring your options. Depending on what cards you have in your deck, I might make an assessment that the creatures that you put into play, like you said, you don't get the play effect. So Eddie and all of that doesn't work. If you have something that can be used and then get a stop or shadows creatures, I have to figure out what my risk tolerance is for those creatures showing up on the board ready. So I have to look at the discard pile and stuff like that. But giving your opponent the control over when this card triggered is what makes it so much weaker.
Right.
In general, in Keyforge, it's powerful to have control over how certain effects are resolved. And I'm giving that control to my opponent. Gain 3 can really put them over the top. And suddenly you have to respond with whatever happened to be in your hand. And maybe you get an additional chance because you did get to refill cards based on the however many creatures ended up on the board. But you also could have been trying to set up for a multi-turn situation where you were going to be able to stop me. Like I was out of gas and I didn't have much amber production left in me. And now all of a sudden I'm on key and you can't take that turn you want to take because you have to stop me from forging the third key.
Right. Yeah. Even without the amber gain for your opponent, I'm not completely sold on the value of this card. It's just giving your opponent so much control, and it's such a gamble. I mean, unless you have a very creature heavy deck, there's a decent chance that this doesn't do much for you and just giving your opponent 3 amber. I mean, there are probably some decks where it'll be pretty good if you've got a bunch of creatures that don't have play effects, but I think this might be a discard a reasonable amount of the time.
Yeah, it's challenging to use, and I think a way they could tweak it is to say this card just triggers after a certain number of turns, or when I play it, I place creatures from my hand under it or something like Spangler Box. And then after it blows up, I know what I'm getting. Just a little bit more control. Right. As it stands, your opponent has most of the control, and they could randomly take cards out of your hand. There's some cards in the set that just let you look at your opponent's hand, right? Like Brain Drain, which is a card in Unfathomable.
Yeah. Right.
That, among other things, lets you view your opponent's hand. And so you could look and see there are no creatures. It's time for me to use the Sauropod right away.
Yeah, or they've got their Edis in hand. I'll use it right now, and then yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit weak.
Yeah, and I don't know. Maybe if they tied the amber gain to the number of creatures played, make it half the number of creatures played or something like that, it could be a little bit better. But I think it'll take a very specific deck and even still a particular matchup to make this worth playing.
Yeah, I think the design space is very interesting, and I hope they continue to explore cards like this. I think this one seems a little imbalanced in favor of you not choosing to play it.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I definitely think it's an interesting card. That's why I suggested we cover this one, because I think it's really interesting, but I don't think it's going to show up in a lot of competitive decks.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you could play it and then you borrow it and then you get 3. That's a possibility.
Well, actually, it would come in exhausted and it wouldn't ready until the end of your opponent's next turn. So if you have both the Sauropod and whatever way you have to activate it in hand at the same time, in theory that could work, but seems unlikely. Or you would need a lot of archiving to support it.
Right. There's another card in Shadows, like Hornswoggle, I think,
that lets you use your opponent's artifact.
It has the same effect as remote access.
Right, which would blow it up. So, yeah, that's true.
Right.
All right, well, this has been our look at Trojan Sauropod. Check back tomorrow for a look at another card.